Between 1800 and 1900, how working people spent their free time changed dramatically. This program uses autobiographical writing and contemporary comment to tell the story of how and why the recreations of the working classes changed. In 1838, Charles Shaw started work at the age of 8 in a pottery works. In his autobiography, he recorded his memories of work time and free time.
I very soon found out that though I was required to be there 6 days a week, on Monday morning I was not required to be there before breakfast time. I found too that the place in which I worked bore a holiday aspect on Monday and Tuesday. The entertainment consisted in rough play when the men were drinking on the premises. One favourite form of this was to place a greenware vessel, sufficiently dry to hold water, above a door partially opened and send for someone. The cuter folks always gave the door a shove before they entered the shop, and down came the water on the floor. But those in a hurry, or the thoughtless or the simple, went forward and got the full contents of the vessel, amid the uproarious jeers of those who were looking on. Colliers and potters rarely worked much on Monday, and yet it was rare for any of these men to get on Saturdays less than a full week's wage. From Wednesday to Saturday, they worked themselves and worked others, boys and women, like galley slaves, from 4 and 5 in the morning till 9 and 10 at night.
This was Charles Shaw's introduction to working life. Was this how everyone worked in the 1830s? At the 1840 Committee on the Health of Towns, Joseph Fletcher said that handloom weavers
absent themselves from work nearly the whole of Saturday, Sunday, the whole of Monday, and a little of Tuesday. Then they work excessively hard from Tuesday until the beginning of Saturday, and often through the whole of Friday night.
Until the later 18th century, the organisation of work was often irregular. Those like the handloom weavers who worked at home controlled their own hours of work. Work and leisure often overlapped. In agriculture, market day was partly a social occasion. An irregular work pattern was still found in the pottery workshops in the 1830s, when Charles Shaw began work. The throwers, turners and handlers did little on a Monday and Tuesday, then worked long hours for the rest of the week. Monday was called Saint Monday, because people were so often away from work, it was like a Saint's Day holiday. But for one group of working people, this practice was either fast disappearing or already a thing of the past. At the same committee in 1840, Joseph Fletcher said factory workers were
tied to regular hours.
For those who worked in factories, the line dividing work and leisure was becoming more and more rigid. The hours of work were set by the factory owner, and what was to happen within those hours was strictly controlled. The lives of the mill workers were run by the clock and the bell. Lists of rules of the mill, like this one from Ainsworth's in Preston, were commonplace. It was the use of machinery that demanded regular hours. The very rigid hours therefore applied particularly in the highly mechanized textile industry. The steam-driven machines were a big financial investment for the mill owners, and their concern was to keep the machines working to make a profit on their investment. What little opportunity there was for recreation was in the few hours spent away from the mill. This is how Charles Shaw saw people spending their free time in the 1830s.
Bare-knuckle fighting and dog fighting were then in much favour. These succeeded the cockfighting of a previous generation. In every street where there was a beer shop, you would probably find a couple of men, stripped to the waist, pounding at each other in regular fisticuff order, till they battered each other black and red. Or else a couple of dogs would be devouring each other amid a howling ring of brutal men.
The activities which Charles Shaw witnessed were popular pastimes in the first quarter of the 19th century. Cruel sports like cockfighting, bull baiting and bear baiting were common until, in 1835, the Cruelty to Animals Act made baiting animals for sport illegal. These entertainments were mainly for men. Women had little free time. When they weren't working outside the home, they were working in the home. Both men and women did go to the fairs and festivals which were held at intervals throughout the year. A bank holiday fair was a big event. It featured everything from roundabouts and swings to peep shows, animals, waxworks, and plenty of alcohol. But rowdy fairs and blood sports were not the only amusements of working people. Mary Russell Mitford lived at 3 Mile Cross near Reading in the 1840s. She saw something quite different.
I doubt if there be any scene in the world more animating than a cricket match. The cricket match I mean is a real, solid, old-fashioned match between neighbouring parishes, where each attacks the other for honour and a supper, glory and half a crown a man. Our country lads, accustomed to the hammer or the flail, have free use of their arms. They know how to move their shoulders, and they can move their feet too, they can run. A village match is the thing, where a day labourer is our bowler, a blacksmith our fielder, where the spectators consist of the retired cricketers, the veterans of the field, the careful mothers, the girls, and all the boys of 2 parishes, where laughing, shouting, and the very ecstasy of merriment and good humour prevail.
In the country or town, there was one place which was at the centre of working people's recreation.
It was resolved to hold a Maying.
A May festival.
The business part of the affair was confided to the diligence, zeal, activity and intelligence of that most popular of village landlords, mine host of the Rose Inn.
On Mondays and Tuesdays, one or both throwers will be away drinking at a house called the Foaming Quart. Sometimes half the turners will be away drinking too, and always one or both handlers.
The pub in the 19th century played a very important part in working people's lives. Why was the pub so important? It was common practice for an employer to pay the workers' wages in the local pub. This cartoon shows a workman getting his wages. In the background, his wife waits with the children. The landlord is indicating how much of the man's drink bill is to be taken off his wages. The pub was a financial centre for working people in more ways than this. The Morning Chronicle in 1849 reported on Birmingham,
Anyone who walks along the streets and looks at the bills in public houses may see at a glance how deep a hold the club system has taken.
sickness and burial clubs, clothing clubs, medical attendance clubs were all based in pubs. Each week, members of the club paid their subscriptions and the fund, held by the landlord, in time paid money to them for clothing, medical help, or to bury them. The expansion of building in towns in the early 19th century made pubs even more popular. The relentless march of bricks and mortar, as it's described in this cartoon, left few open spaces in which working people could spend their free time. The effect of this was commented on in Edwin Chadwick's 1842 sanitary report. This said about Birmingham,
There are no places where the working people can resort for recreation. The consequence is that they frequent the alehouses.
the pub was the only place people could go to get away from cramped and squalid homes. It was a haven of warmth, light, and often entertainment. Concert rooms were attached to pubs. These were the only places of entertainment for working people. In the middle of the 19th century, the concentration of working people's free time around the pub and alcohol was a cause for much discussion and concern.
In the public house and the gin shop are to be found swearing, cursing, lewdness and disorder. Examine the history of thousands of young men transported to New South Wales and you will find that the chief cause of their misfortune has been their love of strong drink.
He's convinced that drinking alcohol is at the root of all evil. He's a member of the temperance movement that campaigned to ban spirits and in some cases all alcohol. He's quoting a temperance writer, Joseph Livesey.
The frequenters of taverns and gaming houses on Sunday openly insult the laws of the land. Laws which will be held sacred by all good citizens, even if the law of God were not against them.
She's concerned for religious reasons. She doesn't think people should do anything recreational on Sunday, but just go to church. She's quoting from a religious writer, Hannah More.
Sunday being the only leisure day for working men, they naturally seek recreation on that day. In other countries in Europe, every facility is made available on Sundays. Music, the museums and public libraries all display their attractions. There is no place of public resort in this metropolis open on Sundays. 'Tis no wonder working men seek the alehouse.
He's a member of the respectable working class. He wants working people to have access to more places of recreation, not just the pub. He's quoting the Chartist William Lovett.
The Birmingham mechanic will not, in general, if ever, work more than 5 days a week. He frequently spends Monday in the alehouse, and when trade flourishes, it's common to find him only 4 days at his employment. Any manufacturer in the town will affirm my statement to be correct.
He's a factory owner. He thinks his workers' recreations keep them away from work. He's quoting a letter to the Birmingham Journal in 1840.
At present, the working classes frequent in great numbers the races, fairs and periodical merrymakings. Some regulated amusements should surely be provided within the reach of our working men as a matter of policy. It is wise to provide safety valves in regulated amusements. If not guided by the government or the rich, they will fly to dangerous courses.
He's concerned about public disorder at fairs and festivals. He wants to see more controlled recreations. He's quoting the MP Robert Slaney. In the second half of the 19th century, different reformers tried to offer working people other forms of amusement to take them away from the pub. Did the reformers change working people's free time? Thomas Cook was a member of the temperance movement and the Baptist Church. On July the 5th, 1841, he ran his first excursion. In cooperation with the Midland Counties Railway Company, he organised a trip for temperance supporters from Leicester to Loughborough. The return ticket cost 1 shilling, half the normal price. About 500 excursionists met at Leicester Station, accompanied by a brass band. In Loughborough, they had a bread and ham lunch, played cricket in the park and danced to the band. Later, Cook recalled that his idea had been
to make railways subservient to the interests of temperance.
Cook's excursions were a big success. He ran one to the Great Exhibition. A spectacular glass and metal exhibition hall, the Crystal Palace contained exhibits from Britain and around the world. Visitors could go on a 5-shilling day or a 1-shilling day. The Illustrated London News called them
the day of the great folks and the day of the little folks,
and said,
the people's turn has come. The masses have their holiday.
But it wasn't just temperance reformers who took advantage of the new possibilities of travel brought by railways. Train excursions to Blackpool from northern mill towns like Oldham were organised by everybody from the local political parties to bands and the factory workers themselves. The churches too were active in promoting recreation for working people. They supported the development of football teams. Aston Villa was formed in 1874 by young men connected with the Aston Villa Wesleyan Chapel in Birmingham. They already had a cricket club and wanted a sport to play in the winter. Perhaps 1 out of 4 of the early football teams were based around churches, but 3 out of 4 weren't. Teams formed around places of work, localities, and pubs. Matches were played on a Saturday afternoon. As the law and trade union activity reduced hours of work for some people, a half-day holiday on Saturday was more common. Football quickly became an organised spectator sport in which large crowds paid to watch matches. For some people, wages were rising, and football matches provided them with something new on which to spend their money, instead of spending it in the pub. Another new amusement they could spend their money on was a ticket to the music hall. The origin of the music halls was in the concert rooms attached to pubs. In the 1850s, publicans expanded these concert rooms. In 1851, Charles Morton opened Canterbury Hall in Lambeth. It was the first purpose-built music hall. The Era Almanac for 1868 lists more than 30 large music halls and 10 small ones in London, and 300 more around the country, 9 in Birmingham, 8 in Leeds, 8 in Manchester, 10 in Sheffield. Night after night, millions of people bought tickets to spend their evening watching acts like these filmed at the beginning of the 20th century. The reformers did not approve of the music halls. They served alcohol, and the jokes the performers told and the songs they sang were not to the taste of the upright middle class. Nevertheless, the music halls flourished. The second half of the 19th century saw spectacular changes in the ways working people spent their free time. To Charles Shaw, the changes were remarkable.
I ask myself if the leisure and recreation of these days are all illusions. I wonder if these are real people in their thronging thousands that I see on holiday with boxes of all sizes, making up tons of luggage in connection with a trip, surpassing that of their betters 70 years ago. I wonder if the England I knew in my youth, where the bulk of the people of the Midlands had never seen the sea, was an illusion. I know democracy has disappointed in many great moral and intellectual issues. But to say that it has failed to create better moral and material surroundings is to contradict history.
The 19th century saw a continuous expansion in the recreations of working people. Some of it was provided consciously by reformers. Some of it came out of technological change. And some of it resulted from the realization that there was money to be made from entertaining people. All of these combined to give working people a choice of ways in which they could spend their free time.